In this tutorial, what we're going to do is take a look at the first step of actually producing our soldering license. So what I've done since the last tutorial is I've actually been and I've done a process called tinning on this, which is where you put in a special chemical solution which gives it this nice silver finish. You don't have to do that to yours might or might not have that on it. I just purely did it so that if you saw one that was silver, you wouldn't feel too worried. What I also did is I finished drilling all my other holes, so I've got my 3mm hole that we talked about before, my 1mm and my two 1.6mm holes just here. The first thing we do when we put together the soldering license is we do our resistors, and as you can actually see, you can see here all the different resistor values. So you can see I've got 300, 2K2, 470 and 18K. So you need to go to the components and take out the correct ones. I'm going to do my 330 ohm resistor first, and I'll also do the diode, and I'll leave you to do the rest of the resistors for yourself. What you need to be able to do is to tell the difference between one resistor and another. When you pick up a resistor, different resistors have different coloured bands on them. Okay, so this particular one here that I've got in my hand right now, I don't know if you can see this or not, but basically it's got a what looks like a yellow band. Then I'm going to go with probably a purple band, and then a brown band, and then a gold band on the end. Okay, the way that the colour scheme works is that the bands, when read from left to right, make sure you have the gold one on the right hand side of you when you hold that up. Okay, you start with the left hand band. To remember the colours, there's a mnemonic that I always use, admittedly not a very good one, it does work, and it goes a bit like this. Okay, it goes black, brown, Richard of York gave battle, purple. Okay, and what that means is starting from 0, that's what all the colour values are. So black is 0, brown is 1, and then red, orange, yellow, and so on as you go through. So let's try and work out what this resistor is just here in my hand. Okay, so the first band's yellow, so it's black, then brown, red, orange, yellow. Yellow is 4. Okay, so the first band represents a 4. The second band is purple. Okay, again, black, so 0, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, purple 7, anyway. Anyway, that's why I don't do these things live. Purple is 7, and the last one is brown, which is the number of zeros that you need to stick on the end of that particular value. So I've got 4, 7 and 1 0, so it's 470. So this is my 470 ohm resistor. So actually I suppose I might as well put that one in if I've got it in my hand. So I'm locating the two holes here, which have got 470 on them, either side of them, like this. And I'm going to poke one leg of the resistor through there, through the side that doesn't have any writing on, roll it over, and pop it through the other end like so. So that I end up with it sitting flat against the actual PCB. That's really important that you keep that flat. I'm then keeping my finger on top of there as I turn it back over, and I'm then going to take the individual component legs and I'm going to splay them out at about 45 degrees so it ends up looking something like I've got just here. Okay, a lot of people are tempted to lay these down flat. I don't understand why people want to do that. If you do lay them down flat, then what happens is as you start to solder, the solder sometimes runs along those legs that you stuck down and you end up with bad soldered joints. So make sure you don't do that. Make sure you leave them sticking up in the air like I've got here at 45 degrees. The reason we do it is that when I take my finger off the bottom, that component just here doesn't suddenly drop and fall down and drop out. So let's now look at actually soldering this component into place. So I'm going to place it into my my clamp that I've got just here. Okay, it's sat there really nicely. I'm going to put my goggles on. My soldering iron I've had warmed up for quite some minutes, so that'll be hopefully all ready to go. And what I've also got here is some solder. So I'm going to uncoil about sort of, I don't know, 10 centimeters or so of solder. When you do this, another little top tip, what you don't want is to have the solder so short that you can't actually see what you're doing, or you don't want to have it insanely long so that when you are trying to solder, you end up so you're all over the place. So that's why you want to use, a fairly sort of short but workable distance like I've got here, so you can be fairly steady with it. The technique for soldering, as you may or may not know already, it goes a little something like this. You're going to pick up your soldering iron. We're going to have it sort of quite vertical when we come in as well. Okay, when we come into our piece of work, we're going to have it quite vertical. If you look on the soldering iron, you'll see it's actually got a flat edge. Okay, a flat edge on the actual iron itself. Okay, and what we're going to try and do is we basically want it so the bottommost sort of pointiest part of the soldering iron, that's going to be touching the pad on the PCB itself, the part we're soldering to, and the upright, I want that really to be sort of touching the leg of the component, so I'm touching two different things. Once I put that in place, I'm going to hold that there for about 3 seconds. While I'm leaving it there, I'm then going to gently feed in a small amount of solder, take the solder away, and finally lift the soldering iron off. And as long as I do it in that order, then I'll end up with, hopefully, a good, neat, clean soldered joint. Now, because I've only just turned this soldering iron on, what I'm doing before I start is I'm feeding a very small amount of solder onto the top of the soldering iron. This is called tinning the tip, and it just helps to make sure that when I do come to do my soldering, then it's going to solder really, really neatly. Okay, so let's go and we'll see how we get on. So first thing, my soldering iron is going into position. Okay, that's there. It's up at a nice steep vertical angle. I've probably counted to 3 by now. I then feed in at the bottom a small amount of solder. Here it's going in. Look, you see that's feeding in really neatly. Okay, about that much. And then I'm taking away the soldering iron. So that's soldered on. I've actually put on slightly too much solder on this one, and I can tell that because this has got a sort of a round look, and the kind of effect that I'm looking to achieve is to have, if you imagine my fingers were tented, kind of like I've got just here. I want that sort of look, where this part here is my pad, and that part here is running up my leg. So I'm going to try it on this one to do a slightly neater job. So, here we go again. So this time, soldering iron going in, nice steep angle. Okay, so you can see that. Solder goes in, soldering iron comes off. And again, not a great one actually, which is unusual for me. I'm normally pretty good. But nonetheless, that has actually soldered the two of them into position. Let's try one more resistor. And in fact, let's do the diode next, and I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. In my defence, what I will say is that when you look at this particular soldering iron tip, it's got like loads of dirty old solder on it. It's not particularly clean, so I should probably get a brush on that, or get my technician to look at it at some point for me. Okay, once you have soldered the legs onto your components, what you can then do is take yourself a pair of these side cutters, which is a lovely little tool, and we use that just to get in nice and close on the PCB, like this, okay? And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently snip that off, come on with the other one, and snip that one off as well, okay? Do that as you go along, get into the habit of doing that, and you'll hopefully get a much neater thing. Okay, one of the other components we've got is a diode. A diode is a component which only allows current to flow one way through it. And on the soldering license, it's located in the bottom right-hand corner, just down here, and I've even drawn a little arrow on to indicate the direction of current that I want to allow to flow. If I pick up my diode, just for a second, we take a little look at that. This is the diode itself just here in my hand, okay? Now with the diode, you'll see it's got a grey coloured band around one end of it, just here. And the grey coloured band is a bit like an arrowhead, indicating the direction of current flow. So again, current can flow through it this way. So my diode needs to go on this way around, like so. So let's put that in position now. So it's going to go through the leg, bend it round. Now diode leg is significantly thicker than all the other components because they're designed to carry a lot more current and be used on bigger systems. So rather than trying to struggle and do battle and really struggle with this, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a tool to help me, because it's always appropriate to do that whenever you can. I'm going to use some long nose pliers that I've got just here, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab both of these at the same time and then use those to pull the diode through onto my board, okay? Now again, I'm not doing this as a sort of a show of strength or anything like that. I'm just literally letting the tool do the work for me. And then back to the same idea as before. Leg goes out 45 degrees, leg goes out 45 degrees, and that's now very, very sturdy in there indeed, all ready to be soldered. So let's solder again. Same technique as before. With a bit of luck, I'll do slightly better than I did the last time around. So the soldering iron goes in, nice and vertical. Count to 3. Feed in a small amount of solder. Soldering iron comes off. That was a good one. Soldering iron goes on. Count to 3. Feed in the solder. Soldering iron comes away. Again, another good result actually. That's gone on there really, really neatly. So, with that done, I can now get in there again, just like I did before. I can use my side cutter and I can trim those ends off. So that gives me that. All that now remains is to put on my remaining resistors, which are going to go in just here, okay? And in the next tutorial, when we come back, I'll have all of mine finished, and we'll look at the next step. So I'll see you then.